This is the webinar you have been waiting for. Um, we are so delighted to see all these friendly names in the chat. This is so exciting. I'm sorry, can we go back one, please? This is the webinar will be recorded and there are live captions. You can enable those live captions at the bottom of your screen. We do have the chat open, as you can see, everyone's chiming in, saying hello. We also have a Q&A function, so feel free to drop questions in the Q&A, and if you drop them in the chat, we'll try and get them as well. Let's go to the very next slide, please. Here's our agenda for today. We are going to have a welcome. We're going to give an overview of the guide. This webinar is for Equitable Dual Enrollment Policy to Practice Guide. It's an incredible, amazing resource that we'll be dropping in the chat multiple times and different sections as well. We're going to have an overview of this fantastic guide. We're going to have an amazing example from our colleague, Christine Tapia from Napa Valley College, and then we'll do some Q&A. I'm Naomi Castro. Hello, I'm one of your many hosts. Let's jump right into it. And we're going to have a welcome via video from the amazing Dr. James Todd, the Assistant Vice Chancellor for Ed Services and Support at the Chancellor's Office.
Hello, and on behalf of the California Community College's Chancellor's Office, welcome to this webinar. I want to extend some sincere gratitude to our partner, Career Ladders Project, not only for hosting this webinar, but for the work that they have accomplished across our system. They have changed the lives of countless Californians in the ways in which they have provided capacity building and support to expand equitable dual enrollment across our system. And that is part of the reason we are here today, to learn from them, to share this resource, which is the culmination of many years of their work, and to continue our efforts in serving our state. So thank you so much for this opportunity that you have provided in the partnership and collaboration you've been part of. Also, thanks to many of you that are on this webinar right now. I'm sorry I wasn't able to join you live, but thank you for a few moments to join you via recording to talk a little bit about our system work, which is really inside of Vision 2030. And if you haven't read Vision 2030, I suggest you kind of Google it. You can easily find it on our website. And it shows in a very short document our key frameworks for engagement across our system, our metrics, and really our work plan for the rest of this decade in providing equitable access, equitable support, and equitable success for our students. And it's a real roadmap for the ways in which we're engaging system work at scale to serve California. So I encourage you to look at that. And what you'll find at the center and the heart of it is dual enrollment and how that work is aligned with our work, our continued efforts in guided pathways, but how dual enrollment is a powerful lever for us to close equity gaps, to extend pathways for students, and to accelerate the completion of degrees and credentials. And what we find when we look across our system is that dual enrollment opportunity is strong. This is data from 2022-23. Even the most recent data still continues to show some of these gaps that are here on the left, in which you see age ranges 13 and 14, 15, 16, 17, and 19 across high school head count. And what the blue represents is the dual enrollment head count. In other words, what's in these open spaces in each one of these graphs is the opportunity we have to reach students that are not participating in dual enrollment in those age ranges. So the opportunity is strong for our system, and the opportunity is there for us to start thinking about equitable access in terms of serving a diverse California and changing the lives of students. And we oftentimes think about this as getting students early on into a ninth grade course and a plan to continue to 12 units. But we also emphasize that it's not too late to work with 10th graders, 11th graders, and 12th graders to get to 12 units before they graduate, because that's a critical amount of units that can propel them forward into a degree, get towards baccalaureate attainment, or towards a credential or a degree that's going to lead towards employment at through the California community colleges. We also prioritize, when we think about dual enrollment, getting the number of juvenile justice involved students participating and succeeding in community colleges. So our Rising Scholars program continues to be a champion and to help provide leadership across our system and providing these opportunities and building capacity to serve justice involved students. And that is a priority for us as a system in terms of changing lives and serving California. So when we think about dual enrollment, we think about several avenues for students to succeed in community college and providing opportunities for California. In expanding dual enrollment, we continue to focus on this, but I will say one area where we're trying to devote more time and resources is in working with our regional consortia. They're oftentimes aligned, or they are aligned with our strong workforce program across the state, but they are also engaged in dual enrollment already, working with our K-12 pathway coordinators, our K-14 TAP. Our regional chairs help to support systems of dual enrollment across our state, as well as working with our guided pathways regional coordinators. So one of the things the Chancellor's Office is invested in, especially across this year, is to hope to develop regional dual enrollment engagement plans to support districts inside of those regions and to start to map out some systematic goals and ways to reach them in expanding dual enrollment across our state. Of course, we want to drive partnership and expansion and communication in those plans, and also to share promising practices across our regions, which is one of the things we're doing right here with this webinar right now. And so as I pass this back over to our partners at Career Ladders Project, I just want to again acknowledge their incredible efforts in serving our system and our students. And thank you so much for providing this opportunity for the webinar participants and providing this resource for our system through the partnership and collaboration with our office. So I'll hand it over to you, and I hope everyone has a great webinar, and thanks for being here.
Yay. Thank you so much, Dr. Todd. We wish him well. He's doing 100 million things today, and the system is in good hands with amazing leadership like his. For CLP's part, we really wanted to harken back just a little bit to 2015 when CCAP was passed as legislation, AB 288. And at that time, I see in the chat a lot of friends and a lot of colleagues who I know were doing dual enrollment back then as well, before CCAP. And when CCAP came out, it was such a great gift to dual enrollment practitioners and especially to students across the state. But if we remember, there were so many questions about it. So at that time, CLP had a wonderful partnership with the Chancellor's Office, with the RP Group, and with the James Irvine Foundation. And together we pulled resources and created the dual enrollment toolkit, which I think many of you on this webinar have utilized. A lot has changed since 2016. Dual enrollment legislation changes just about every year or so, often, opening those doors even wider to include more students to dual enrollment. And so the old toolkit from 2016 is not quite what we need today in 2025. So we were so grateful for this partnership with the Chancellor's Office to be able to provide a new resource that's kind of like a new updated toolkit, but it's also very different. And we learned a lot of lessons from the original one. We kept the things that really worked, and then we updated a lot of things as well. And so you'll hear more about that today. But it's been fantastic working with the Chancellor's Office. We're also very grateful for the Gates Foundation, who provided some funding that was able to supplement some of the stories and examples that you're going to see in the guide. And so with that, let's get into it. So I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Michelle, who's going to give us an overview.
All right. Thank you, Naomi. Hi, everyone. So we wanted to give you just a kind of brief overview of what you'll find in the guide and give you a little bit of direction as you're kind of exploring it. So this is the table of contents for the guide, and each section kind of offers you slightly different opportunities. So as you're coming at the guide, kind of thinking about if you're in a redesign space and you have dual enrollment offerings, but you're wanting to think about how you can make them more equitable, build them out into pathways, the designing pathways section, the onboarding section, the outreach section, and the supporting students gives a lot of really good ideas and examples about how you might take your existing dual enrollment offerings and kind of think about those from an equity lens as you're approaching redesign. If you're at a stage where you're trying to pause and evaluate what you're doing and see where you're going to go next, there's a lot of really awesome resources in the structures and policies section. Scheduling has a great new tool as well as some guidance on how to approach scheduling with some examples. There's a data section that gives you kind of an overview about how you might approach evaluating your dual enrollment offerings from an equity lens. And then the enrollment section, I see a question in the Q&A about enrollment. We know that enrollment processes are some of the most challenging, so you'll find a lot of good resources in there. And then if you're really just looking for what is that law or policy that is dictating all of this, the structures and policies has a ton of great resources in it. And also the enrollment has a lot of great references to the Title V. And then if you jump down to the resources section, there's these kind of resources and tools embedded throughout, and that resource section has them all organized topically. So you may be able to find something that really gives you exactly what you need in the moment that you need it. So with that, we're gonna introduce you not only to the PDF guide that Devin has put into the chat, but also the online guide that is up on CLP's website, and just kind of walk you through the different components of each section of the guide. So each of those sections that you saw in the table of content offers kind of an overview with some information about this topic. And it goes into some detailed descriptions that give you a good sense of kind of where the field is going, what some promising practices are, where, you know, we've tried to really kind of take the questions that are coming up as CLP is working in the field and kind of embed resources and answers in here. So you'll see that in each section. And then each section also has equity considerations. So in this section, this is the structures section. So you'll see lots of resources on dual enrollment structure. And then each section has this equity considerations and choosing structures, right? So what should you be considering as far as what your students' needs are as you're redesigning your dual enrollment pathways? And then each section also has various tools and resources. So these are embedded in, oh, yeah, sorry, I skipped this one. So each section also has college examples. We're going to go into that a little bit more later. Some of them are longer. Some of them are short little 2 sentences like, hey, this is what this college is doing to support students. This is kind of a shorter example. We'll jump to a longer example later in the webinar. And then the tools and resources that are embedded in each section are also linked in the resources section. So just know that they're in 2 places, but each section has different types of resources depending on the topical area. So the ones that I wanted to point out in this one is the dual enrollment policies table. which is kind of gives you a nice overview of the different policies that you may be looking for and trying to understand. And then the misconceptions table right below this is another tool, and this is searchable by keyword. So if you're looking for something specific and you want to find what's the ed code, because I want to answer this question about this particular topic, you can search that by keyword. And then the last parts of each of the sections include some sort of getting started resources. So in some cases, it's a tool or some guiding questions. Sometimes it's guidance, depending on the topical area. And then finally, there's resources and FAQs at the end of each section. So each of those has a drop down and kind of separate links there. So that is the online guide. That is also very useful depending on your preference. If you like PDFs and Control F, or if you like looking at a website, you have both those options. All right, so when you're working with this guide, really think about it as a user manual. So our intention was to design it for folks who are in some capacity working with dual enrollment. So whether you're brand new as a dual enrollment coordinator, or you're a current dual enrollment manager seeking to solve a problem, or you're just trying to learn about dual enrollment generally, we kind of designed it with, okay, somebody's going to come with a question that they're looking for an answer to. And so use it like you would the user guide for your car or your computer or something like that, where you're learning about a specific topic. And then for those of you that are really just trying to learn about dual enrollment, I think plugging into some of those key topical areas like designing pathways. What does that look like? Outreach and recruitment for historically underserved students. Those provide nice general information, as well as the resources section that has some good kind of other resources and student stories and things like that that you can jump into. So with that, I'm going to pass it back over to Dr. Castro, I believe, to talk a little bit more about tools and stories.
Thank you so much. Thank you. There are tools throughout the entire guide, and sometimes the tools take the form of like a guided discussion that you might want to engage with your partners. Some of my favorite tools are the getting started tools, where it's just kind of outlines a series of steps and like who you might need by role in different parts of the process, whether it's designing pathways or designing student supports. But if we go to the next slide, I'm going to show you some of the interactive tools that we have as well. So scheduling classes, we all know that this is a challenge area. High schools and colleges do not have the same kind of schedule or the same kind of scheduling constraints. And so we're trying to make them work together. So we have a really detailed section in the guide that talks all about the kinds of considerations partnerships should be aware of when they're figuring out the schedule, including things like average daily attendance and apportionment and all that kind of great information. And if we go to the pop-up, you can see that we have a link to a scheduling tool. Now, this is a tool that CLP developed. It's free for everybody. You just go to the website and you request a copy and we send it to you. And it's really a series of very helpful spreadsheets that have formulas embedded into them. So the first set are to figure out the daily schedule for dual enrollment courses. So on the K-12 side, and we've seen lots of colleagues on here who are from K-12. Shout out to Hollywood. We know that there's instructional time and there's non-instructional time, and that's what goes into our ADA. So this helps you just kind of figure that out for a daily schedule, and you can repeat that schedule every day of the week, or you can have different schedules. Then there's other spreadsheets in there that really help on the college side. We are beholden to and very concerned with contact hours. So over the course of the semester, we need to have the appropriate number of contact hours that allows, the college to then, grant credit, college credit for the courses. And so so some of the other spreadsheets in there help the partnerships to figure out when are there holidays that might only be a holiday for the high school and not for the college? When are there spring breaks? Are there testing, state testing for the high school that would interrupt, anything that might interrupt the regular college schedule. So you can figure out all of those. Of course, we all try and do this anyway, but this tool gives the partnership something to talk about together, and where we're all on the same calendar, the same tool. So folks who've been using it find it really helpful. So everybody jump in there and get that one. And if we can go to the next slide. Another question. Oh, and thank you, Devin, put the link to the scheduling section in there. Another question that we all have, and rightly so, is that of access. So we really want to make sure that we're being equitable in our access for dual enrollment. And so CLP has developed another free tool. It's in this section. We have a in the guide, starting on page 99 in the PDF, a section on what kinds of questions the partnership needs to be asking to kind of figure out, are we providing equitable access? Like, where do we start? And then there's a pop-up as well on this slide deck about another tool that we have. Again, you just request access to it. And with data, publicly available data throughout the state for high schools, and specific data that's been available in our partnership with the Chancellor's Office, we have an access gap tool. Now, college and high school partnerships do need to input some of their local data, but it gives them comparisons against the high school population so that they can really look at which students are accessing dual enrollment and which students are not proportionately. And then you put in the information, and then it spits out all these amazing charts that are really helpful for partnerships to then have further discussion about how they're doing their outreach, how they're doing their recruitment, how they're messaging to families, to students, to other instructors, to counselors. So all of those things are in there. The tool is free, but there's also lots of other resources in there so that you can start having those conversations together where you're all looking and working in the same direction. So and thank you for dropping that link in, Devin. Let's go on to the next slide. As Michelle explained, we also have examples in here. We spoke with over 25 colleges, over half a dozen high schools, and there's detailed stories and then there's light vignettes throughout. So let's go to the next slide. Many folks have heard about the amazing partnership between McFarland High School and Bakersfield College. There's a really detailed write-up in here about how they make dual enrollment just really, really work for that partnership so that every single student has access to at least 12 units, and many of them complete associate degrees. And this was a comprehensive high school that transitioned into becoming an early college high school. It's a pretty amazing story. And there's a detailed vignette of the McFarland and Bakersfield partnership in there on page 28 if you're in the PDF. And then let's go to the next slide. And then there's really fantastic examples. Sierra College, shout out Sierra College if you're on the Zoom. They do some really great work with faculty onboarding. We want you to read all about it. And then their orientation, their training, it's just really incredible, really thoughtful and comprehensive. So we want you to read about it. It's on page 50 of the PDF. And speaking of college examples, we're going to transition now. I'm going to introduce my dear colleague, Laurencia Walker, who's going to help us out with our college example.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. Castro, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm excited to introduce Christine Tapia, Manager for Educational Partnerships in Early College at Napa Valley College, who leads and supports dual enrollment at her campus. As you heard earlier, there are a variety of examples from the field, from those that are actually doing the work. And so Christine's going to share some examples that you actually might come across in the guide, as well as share how the guide can be used in practice. So feel free to follow along in the guide as we'll be referencing specific sections and chatting about them with Christine in this part. So as you can see here on the screen, go ahead and grab either go on the web version or go through the guide and advance to page 11. And at this point, we'll go ahead and start off with our first question and example for Christine. So Christine, we often hear people say they want to expand dual enrollment. Should we do a middle college, an early college, engage in a CCAP agreement, non-CCAP MOU, and oh yeah, equity. We need to make sure we're being equitable with our efforts. So can you share a little bit about how Napa Valley College centered equity when choosing your structure?
Absolutely. Thank you, Laurencia. So I want to start by saying that at NVC, we really want to look at equity as a foundational thing. It's not an add-on. And I think when you have that mindset, you don't start by asking how to expand dual enrollment. You start by asking who you are expanding it for and what barriers they may face. So a great example of that is our partnership with New Technology High School, where we saw an opportunity to align college access with the school's project-based inclusive culture by creating an early college program. So for context, the New Technology Campus in Napa is the flagship school of the New Tech Network. So its core values are project-based learning, industry-based internship, and college engagement. Also, over 68% of the students are considered socioeconomically disadvantaged, and about 14% are English learners. And that data isn't unique to New Tech alone. That is data that is reflective of the overall K-12 demographic in Napa County. So in addition, we've also faced, as most schools, declining enrollment from 22-23 to 23-24. So the decision to create an early college program within New Tech made sense for our partnership with Napa Valley Unified School District. And rather than expecting the students to opt in, we really flipped that model where every student is guaranteed early exposure to college coursework. And you'll see the nuances on the slides here where they really start at 9th grade. All 9th graders take a college discovery course, and then by 10th grade, they would have completed another course. So 2 college level courses by 10th grade. We have embedded college success workshops, not just during advisory, but intersession. So it's built into their bell schedule, and it really behaves as an annex to the college, even though they're about 10 minutes away from us. The placement for students in coursework and college coursework is really around data and also based on their interest in academic performance. So we want to make sure that they're not just randomly placed in courses that they might not connect to or doesn't fit their educational goals. So this kind of partnership works because it really honors the school's identity while expanding the students' future possibilities.
Thank you, Christine. Moving right along to another example and another area that you all can follow along in the guide on page 17. So Christine, you all decided on the structures you wanted to collectively pursue, and that also led to the need to improving policy. Can you tell us more about revising your policies and that impact on dual enrollment?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is so important for us. Once we saw the success at New Tech, and it's only been, we launched it in fall of 24, but we've seen the success, this early success already. And so once we saw that success, we asked ourselves, why isn't this the norm everywhere? Right. So in response to this, we also reviewed and reframed our policies and practices with an equity focus. A great example of this is our overhaul of our CCAP onboarding. So instead of expecting our students to navigate the system on their own, we brought the system to them, into the classrooms, into their registration days that we hold at their high school sites or on main campus, and also into the languages that their families understand. So our students receive support where they need it, whether it's on site at the high school or their main campus or even online, because they're guided in sessions by trained staff and student ambassadors a lot of the times. Their parents also have multilingual materials such as our dual enrollment handbook for students and parents, which is available in both English and Spanish. Next slide, please. And we didn't stop there. So we revised our registration priorities so that high school students aren't competing with regular college students or college seniors for a seat. They have guaranteed access to. So this change, which is fairly recent, was really all about fairness. So we serve quite a large population of rural or under-resourced students. And when you serve students from rural areas or under-resourced in terms of counseling support, and they feel like they are last in line in that priority to access dual enrollment, the system tells them they don't belong. And that is not a message that we wanted to send those students. So priority registration was one way that we were able to change that narrative. So it's really about equity in action, right? Removing the structural hurdles before the students even step into the classroom, which motivates them more to participate in access dual enrollment.
Great examples of seeing how policy can be impacted at the local level. Thanks for that, Christine. So with getting started, we know that dual enrollment partnerships sometimes primarily just have to discuss the day-to-day and discuss specific course requests. And aside from reporting for CCAP or perhaps career education programming, our pathways thoughtfully discussed. Can you share you all's approach to one of your newer dual enrollment pathways?
Yes, absolutely. And this is like something that we love to showcase because we're just so proud of what it does for our students. So when we were thinking about the design of our pathways, we thought of designing for equity, which also means that we ask ourselves what stories we're telling with our programs, right? Not just focusing on equity and access, but also equity and completion and success, because that is in alignment with what Vision 2030 wants us to do, encourages us to do. So the creation of the LGBT studies pathway within our early college program at New Tech is such a stellar example of this. I want to give a shout out to Greg Moralia, who's the program coordinator of the LGBT studies program at Napa Valley College. I believe he's on the Zoom right now. This pathway is, at its heart, culturally relevant, but it also leads to workforce credentials, and it validates the identities of students who are often overlooked. So it fulfills Vision 2030 and California workforce goals. I think what's important here is that we really centered student voice and identity in this pathway, in preparation for them getting prepared for careers. So because of that, this pathway has really become one of our strongest examples of inclusive career-connected education. And the students in this pathway are not just doing really well academically in the classroom, they are super active in connecting with the college to collaborate on activities outside of the classroom with our Pride Learning community for cultural, educational, and advocacy activities. So some of the images that you see on this slide, this year, the students inaugurated the Pride Center at NVC. They hired Pride ambassadors. They held a screening of Sally, the documentary film about Bay Area activist Sally Gearhart. They hosted a dedication of the Freedom to Love sculpture, which was a donation to Napa Valley College by the Gilbert Baker Foundation. So Gilbert Baker is the creator of the Rainbow Pride flag. And they capped the year off, a very busy year off, with a teach-in with Napa Valley College and City College of San Francisco students in a tour of the Castro District in San Francisco with faculty, staff, our program coordinator, Mr. Moralia, and our superintendent president, Dr. Torrance Powell.
Exciting work you all are doing at Napa Valley College. Thank you so much for sharing, Christine. And then for another area that we wanted to highlight, just as one of the many examples in the guide that folks can be following along. Again, if you're looking at this live, you can advance to page 57. So Christine, getting students onto exciting pathways like the one you just described can be transformative for some of our young learners that are participating in dual enrollment. And we know it takes work from an outreach and recruitment perspective as well. Would you mind sharing Napa Valley College's innovative approach to this work?
Absolutely. So Napa Valley College isn't very different from other colleges and K-12 schools in terms of staffing constraints for outreach and recruitment. So we know staffing constraints are real, but we also know that students listen to students. And so this has been our approach to equity-centered outreach and recruitment. So that's why we launched the Dual Enrollment Ambassador Program, where we train student leaders to support and mentor their peers through the dual enrollment process. For our ambassadors, it's not just about helping others, it's also about growing future leaders who reflect the communities they serve, which is so important when you're reaching out to historically underserved populations. So we know that students are highly influenced by their peers, right? They speak the same language, they're comfortable sharing their lived experiences, and they're also less anxious about asking questions, especially if they don't have access to college-going guidance at home. So we took an idea from our very own dual enrolled students, and they were high school students who came up with this idea about 3 years ago. And our program matched it with the structure, funding, and administrative oversight. So our ambassadors have access to leadership and professional development opportunities, like the two you see on this at the bottom of the slide, Tyra Fleming and Joshua De Leon, who were featured as panelists at the most recent California Dual Enrollment Equity Conference. I want to give them a shout out because I just found out today that they both got into their dream schools. So Joshua is going to be attending San Diego State in the fall, majoring in kinesiology. And Tyra is double majoring in political science and psychology on a pre-law track at St. Mary's College. So peer-to-peer mentorship programs like this are so critical and rooted in equity, engagement, and belonging. And so they're so critical in supporting underserved students. So I think for us, the dual enrollment program at NBC, given these examples, really views equity as an evolving commitment. It's important for us to continuously ask who's missing from our programs, what structures are creating barriers, and how can students lead the way. So it's not just about numbers, it's really about the redesign of systems so that every student, regardless of background, has the opportunity to explore, succeed, and thrive in dual enrollment.
Congrats to your students. Thank you so much for sharing their accomplishments. I know that's a lot of the reasons why we do the work that we do is to hear these stories and create these opportunities. So thank you for sharing that, and shout out to the students that you highlighted. We know that there's many more like them in the field, and we want to keep creating spaces for our young learners to take advantage of these opportunities to hopefully attend their dream school and get into their ideal careers. And so, Christine, thank you so much for providing an overview of how the guide might be used in practice. But we wanted to go a little bit deeper for the colleagues that are doing the work like you at their respective campuses or supporting folks like you and the partnership. So just a few more questions to dive a little bit deeper. And folks, again, feel free to continue to add questions to the chat or follow along in the guide as appropriate. And so one thing we wanted to talk about is some practitioners might just be getting started with structuring their dual enrollment opportunities, and equity is often mentioned, but what does that really look like in practice from a mere talking point to an actionable endeavor?
I love that question. I think for us, what happened is that we really shifted our mindset on equity from a deficit mindset to an asset mindset. So we shifted our default assumptions. We didn't view it was while it was important to add on supports when we're seeing barriers or certain challenges for dual enrollment. We knew that it wasn't just about adding these supports, but it really should involve an overall review and redesign of your system so that the support is the standard, not the exception or the add-on. So this means, asking ourselves or asking yourselves as practitioners, who is this program really built for, and who might we be leaving out? And so from that lens, we began embedding equity into really the architecture of our work, from everything into how we partner, who we choose to partner with, how we place students, and then how we scaffold their success. So it really isn't about, checking it off a list. It's a full commitment to redesign.
Great. Going a little bit deeper, we know that dual enrollment often requires navigating several barriers, and we're not just talking about the student experience, right? It can be challenging for practitioners with a variety of expertise, and especially when it comes to policies impacting dual enrollment. How did you maintain the equity lens with updating your policies?
Absolutely. Well, first, I want to give a shout out to my Vice President of Academic Affairs, Dr. Priscilla Mora. I see her active on the chat, responding to questions about our various dual enrollment initiatives. So hi, Dr. Mora. We approached policy redesign I would like to think, with humility and curiosity. So we didn't assume that what we had already worked, and what worked for some students would work for all. So instead, we really examined the hidden steps that created friction or challenges for students, especially for our multilingual learners or our first generation students. So instead of looking at the center, I think what we did was we asked, what would this look like if we built it for them first, for the outside, you know? So embedding onboarding in the classroom and ensuring priority registration, like we've shared as examples of this, weren't just technical changes. They really signaled a shift in whose experience we center. And so we take, the ones who are kind of like on the fringes of dual enrollment access, and we put them in the center, and we built around that. And I think when you approach your dual enrollment policy revisions or redesign with that kind of mindset and the humility and curiosity, and not with the assumption that it's a one size fits all approach, it works, right? And we've already seen the positive effects of our revision to these policies and structures.
Thanks so much for that little deeper dive. So we've talked about practices and policies. Let's talk a little bit more about the designing pathways component. And NVC took an innovative and collaborative approach in how you described your dual enrollment career ed LGBTQIA pathway, which creates opportunities for students' growth in many facets of their academic experience. Can you share a little bit more about this pathway's impact on your partnerships?
Yeah. So with the LGBT studies program, we've had it for quite some time at NVC, and it's really kind of a stellar example of, what happens when you look at a pathway not just for its design, but who shapes it. So that the power of a pathway comes with really the voices that shape it for us. So the students help inform the direction. A lot of the activities I've shared are student led. And especially given, today's climate, like you anticipate that they would shy away from that, but they didn't. And instead, they really stepped up and stepped out. And when you lead with that mindset and the student voice helping inform the direction of your pathways, your K-12 partners interest in you to honor that intersection of their identity with the education that they need to have access to. So with the LGBT studies program, the result was a program that didn't just meet academic goals, but affirmed belonging, which is very important for us as a program, very important for the school that we partner with. And it really helped us realize that when you create the space for students to fully show up, you also create stronger, more resilient partnerships. The foundation is there.
Excellent perspective, and I know very useful for our colleagues on the call. Few more questions and then we'll open it up to the larger group. There's some great dialogue going on. And so again, feel free to answer each other's questions in the chat, and then we'll also have some time at the end as well. But just to wrap up with the final few questions, Christine, you briefly mentioned this, a great segue, the student college identity development that is afforded through dual enrollment at Napa Valley College from the pathways you described has led to students' professional development as well in the form of your dual enrollment student ambassador program. Can you share a little bit more about how this has led to your campus being more culturally responsive in your outreach and recruitment efforts?
Absolutely. So cultural responsiveness, not just for our campus, but for our partnerships, meant that we moved from outreach to students to outreach with students. I think that's a very important distinction. And so our ambassadors, even though, initially the idea was to fill the gaps of our limitations of our staffing and supports, they don't just fill that staffing gap. They really redefined how trust is built with other students, especially those who are kind of on the fence about dual enrollment. So when students hear from their peers who have successfully navigated the same systems and reflect their experiences, who look like them, it really changes the conversation. And so the ambassador program really has become more than just, a filler for our staffing needs. It has grown into a leadership pipeline. I mean, you saw that with the success that Tyra and Joshua are going into for fall. And so it is a core part of how we build community. And that's how we really view the ambassador program. Not just it's not just about growing enrollment, recruiting more students, but really growing the community of dual enrollment advocates and champions and participants.
Christine, thank you so much for sharing your practitioner perspective. Are there any concluding comments you wanted to share, or any words of wisdom for our colleagues on the call?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I'm a practitioner, and as a practitioner, I find it incredible that we have so many guides and tools and webinars for dual enrollment, and we would be really remiss if we don't utilize them. So use them and tap into those resources. But overall, I encourage you to kind of do what we did at Napa Valley College, to lead with listening, right? I believe that the most sustainable equity-rooted practices that we've built came from asking students what they needed, and then us being willing to change based on their answers. So it's not a, equity for us in dual enrollment isn't a project with a finish line. It's ongoing, it's iterative. It really is deeply human work. And so, that deep collaboration with your K-12 partners, your community colleges, your industry partners, and your system partners, I mean, a lot of which are here, and building feedback loops with the students is so critical. And never underestimate the power of culturally grounded mentorship. So the work isn't easy, but you can see the evidence of how transformative it is, and the results really speak for themselves. What we like to think about it at NVC is that when we build with students, not just for them, we find that the transformation is just as meaningful for us as it becomes for them.
Thanks again, Christine. It's so refreshing to see colleagues such as yourself doing this work and engaging and continuing to learn and grow from one another's. And so thank you again for sharing how this guide can be useful for practitioners and giving us some very real practical perspectives. So now I'll turn it over to Dr. Castro to facilitate our Q&A in closing.
Thank you so much. Okay, Christine, we're going to start with, there are so many questions that are specific to your work at Napa Valley. So we're going to start with those. Do your ninth graders take courses in the fall? And if so, how are you onboarding those ninth graders?
So that's a great question. Our ninth graders, so for the early college program, I'm going to take that as an example. There are about an average, about 100, 120 ninth graders in that program. And so what we do is we split them into fall and spring cohorts. So they receive the same college discovery class in the fall, and then they're kind of like free to either, take on something in addition for their high school schedule, and then another cohort participates in the spring. So they kind of like flip-flop. As far as the onboarding for ninth graders, it's embedded into their high school onboarding. So the early college program is open enrollment. So once they commit to going to new tech, they have a packet, your usual packet for onboarding for high school, right? All of the forms, etc. And we include the college application, the permit to attend, a FERPA waiver, and all sorts of like all of the things that they need. Also DSPS intake if they are coming in with IEPs or 504 plans.
That sounds really comprehensive. Fantastic. Another question is, how are your high school partners providing supports? And do you do any work around assisting them in developing like internal high school supports?
Yeah, absolutely. So our partners and I don't know if any of them are on the Zoom right now, but our partners with Napa Valley Unified School District have really taken on this true partnership model where I have a counterpart. They have a lead counselor who is a counterpart of our lead counselors for dual enrollment. And we are constantly in the same spaces together talking about how to improve our dual enrollment practices. And so I think, so for them, it's not unusual to receive an email, or not confusing to receive an email about a new change, because they also can expect that we walk them through a lot of these procedural legislative changes, right? So for example, when we decided that we were going to overhaul our CCAP onboarding and revise priority registration, we sent out frequent communications to them. We also got all of the high school counselors who met regularly, monthly. We hosted them on campus to walk them through a lot of these changes and talk to them about anything from priority registration changes to the one-time permit to FERPA to pathways. So we are in constant communication with them, and that's really how you sustain the support and how you build that internal support so that even if you're not there at the high school side, you know you have an advocate and a champion who understands it and who's on the same page with you.
Fantastic. Oh, so good, so good. There's some questions about registration. So this one is for priority registration, are dual enrollment students getting the top, the middle, or open to all college students category at Napa Valley?
They, all of our K-12 students have the priority that is right before open registration. And they actually have an extended and a fairly extended window. So it's about a couple of months, not just like a week or a few days. Because when there's like about 20% of our college population are dual enrolled students, we want to really make sure that they have access to the coursework, right? And we're giving them a slight priority versus just opening it up to everyone and crossing their fingers that they can get into a class.
Yeah. I know that that's certainly a challenge, especially when it comes to non-CCAP dual enrollment
Yes.
and especially for online classes.
Yeah.
And certainly that's, many of us when we were in college may have experienced that as well. We do have some other questions that are more general, and so I'd like to ask them to you first, Christine, and then I can kind of chime in with another answer, unless another CLP colleague or Devin from the Chancellor's office would like to answer some of these. So the first one is, what kinds of data do you have that tells you if students are successful?
Great. So for us, we monitor dual enrollment just as any college program that we have. We have an annual program review process, and we continuously monitor our student success and retention data, just as we would any other program. We've also strengthened our data sharing agreements with our K-12 partners, so that the access to their data as it comes in has really been beneficial for us in thinking about not just what pathways to build, but how the students are doing in them, so that we are in this constant reflection and improvement mode. I think that's very important when you're looking at a large population of students who are participating in it. And also, I mean, the guides and the tools that were shared earlier in this webinar, the access gap tool with career ladders and even like the scheduling tool has really been very beneficial for us, especially the access gap tool, where we not only look at it at a programmatic level, but at a district level, to the point that even our executive leadership and our boards for the K-12 and our college have access to the data provided by the access gap tool and can ask questions and really reflect on how we can expand access. And I think it's really important for them to know that, as they are the ones who are signing off and approving the resources that are allocated for dual enrollment programs, right? Whether it's on the K-12 side or the college side. So I think getting everyone on board with this mindset for data as it drives equity in dual enrollment is really important.
Fantastic. And I know, like, kind of there's some official metrics too for success, right? So C or better is one success metric, the kind of the most common one when we talk about student success. There's also term to term retention. But you also might think in your partnership if there's other kinds of ways that you might want to measure success. So, we invite you to explore those. I do want to touch on one kind of very technical question that's a common potential misunderstanding. And so I want to make sure I get this one right. There's a great question. Is it true that it's a student's right to take a dual enrollment course? The counselors cannot deny them. So when we say counselor, there's a lot of counselors. There's college counselors and there's high school counselors, right? And so a student needs basically they are a college student when they're a high school student. Um, Almost everything that a regular high school student, or excuse me, a regular college student can do, an adult college student, a dual enrollment student can do. There's two exceptions, and one exception is they need a parent or guardian's consent. The other exception is they need the permission from their principal. And many principals delegate that to a high school counselor. So they do need the permission of their principal, which may come through a high school counselor, to to apply to the college. And so that is a permission that they need, unless they're a homeschooled student and they have another process, right? But once they are have obtained that permission, they're a college student and they can take college classes. Colleges can restrict classes based on age, but that's a restriction for everyone, not, they cannot restrict on enrollment status. So if they have, like Napa has an amazing viniculture,
Viticulture and winery technology program.
exactly, right? So I don't know this, but they could restrict that to 21 and older, right?
Yes, we
So
do.
yeah, and if a college has a police academy, for example, and they have a firearm safety class, they might restrict that age to 18 and over. But that's restricted on age for the content of the class. It's not restricted on enrollment status, which is what dual enrollment is. It's an enrollment status. So thank you for allowing me to take that privilege. In the last, oh no, 2 minutes, my friends, we want to make sure that everyone knows that these questions will be answered. When we post the recording, we'll also post the questions and responses to them. So if your question did not get answered, expect a response. Christine, there's a lot of concern in the chat and in the Q&A about students who maybe had an unsuccessful experience. Maybe they withdrew and they have that W, maybe they got a D or an F, and then maybe they continue to take dual enrollment courses. Can you just speak briefly about what you do for students who maybe had an unsuccessful experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So all of our students, whether they're dual enrollment students or regular students, we use Starfish for early alert. And then I would say that that's even more intentional at the high school because there's, Aries too, where even our college instructors who are teaching dual enrollment at the high school sites have access to that and are really trained to communicate really regularly and effectively with high school staff, especially when it comes to concerns, whether it's, academic performance or even behavioral concerns, which happens, right? And so we have a lot of these systems to alert and have really seamless conversations without the barrier of, can we do that because of FERPA? And so I think that constant communication is something that we want to foster. We really have fostered within our partnerships, whether it's through early college or our comprehensive high schools where we have CCAP classes. We also often have a dedicated counselor for dual enrollment, and there are at least a couple of dual enrollment counselors who the high schools know to kind of tap into for a lot of these concerns, whether it's the academic or the behavioral type. We really look at interventions as a community, not just on the college side and the high school side. So while we are mindful of the respective practices and policies on either end, we really want to look at it as a support system for students who are having these challenges, right? And so while there isn't anything in place that says, as a student, you can't take this class because X, Y, and Z, we partner on that intervention and that conversation as well. And a lot of times may bring in their parents, if their parents are involved in that conversation, we have measures in place to be able to have those conversations as well. Because we really view it as, while we're giving the student agency in selecting their college coursework, we also understand that this particular age group needs that very intentional support to be able to succeed in dual enrollment.
That is the best answer I have ever heard. Thank you so much, Christine. There's a huge section in the guide about student supports. So there's examples from all over the state, and we invite you to take a look at them and reach out to those colleges and high schools as well. Thank you everyone so much. We will post the recording, we will post the Q&As and all the resources. Thank you to the Chancellor's Office, as always, for being such a great partner. Take care, everybody.